All right, we are officially on the last section of Module A. And in this section, we're going to talk about the last thing we need, which is exponents, before we start talking about order of operations, where we combine everything that we've talked about so far. So in order to complete this video presentation, the only thing that you need to know is how to multiply sign numbers. Upon completing this presentation, you will be able to understand basic computations with exponents. And the primary difference between this class and the previous course is we are going to figure out how exponents affect negative numbers. This is one of the primary things that you are going to be tested over, and it is one of the things that some students do struggle with, so make sure that you know the differences between what we look at. All right, let's just start with some vocabulary. An exponent, this is the number of times that a number is multiplied by itself. Just like multiplication represents repeated addition, exponents represent repeated multiplication. The exponent is written to the upper right of a number, and that number is what we refer to as the base. The base is the number that is being multiplied. So if we look at an example, we have the number 10, and then we see that little 3 up in the right-hand corner. And so 10 is our base, and 3 is our exponent. Now, 10 cubed, we refer to this as being 10 cubed or 10 to the third. What this represents is 10 times 10 times 10, or 3 tens that are being multiplied together. If you write it without exponents, we refer to this as expanded form. If you multiply 10 times 10 times 10, you get 1,000, and we refer to this as simplified form. If you write it as 10 cubed, we refer to this as exponential form. You are going to see some of these different notations or different terms as you work on the homework assignments or as we get further in this course. So let's look at some examples, and we're just going to start with a very simple one that should be in your wheelhouse. It should have been something you've seen before. We're going to look at 4 to the second power. We also refer to this as 4 squared. And so if we go ahead and write this in expanded form, this is equal to 4 times 4. And if we simplify this, this is equal to 16. All right, now the next thing that I want to talk about is the new material, which is going to be, we're going to talk about negatives and exponents. And we're going to see just some different things that happen. All right, if we look at example B, we have -5 cubed. If we write this in expanded form, this is -5 times -5 times -5. In the previous section, we talked about multiplying sign numbers, and so just a reminder, we can cancel out 2 of these negatives. Because we do have 1 left over, I know that my sign of my final answer is going to be negative. And now if we multiply the 5's together, we get 5 times 5 is 25. And if we multiply that by another 5, we get 125. And so this is going to be our final answer, or simplified form. -5 cubed is equal to -125. All right, let's look at a couple more, and now I want to talk about some even exponents. And so let's start with -2 raised to the fourth. If we look at this, because the negative is inside parentheses, this is equal to -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. We can cancel our negatives, and so we get these cancel, we pair them off, and we have no negatives left, which means our final answer is going to be positive. And now if we go ahead and multiply this out, you can do this a couple different ways. We can do 2 times 2 is 4. We have another 2 times 2 is 4. And if we multiply that together, 4 times 4 is 16. And our final answer is positive. All right, now the next one, I do want to point out that there is a difference between if your negative is inside parentheses and if it's not. So example D, this is the one that you need to kind of put a star next to in your notes because they are very different things. This one, because the negative is not inside parentheses, what this is actually equal to is -2 raised to the fourth. And so we only have one negative, and then our 2 to the fourth, this is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And as we saw in the previous example, that was equal to 16. And again, because the negative is not inside parentheses, we do need to keep it. Okay, so this is as I mentioned, this is the one that a lot of people mess up between example C and D. And so we do want to make sure that you are very careful and you practice these quite a bit so that you know the difference. I had one student, I was doing group quizzes in a face-to-face class, and they were doing group quizzes, and I kept hearing someone say, "But you have to take the baby with you. You can't go anywhere without your baby." And finally, when they turned in their quiz, I asked him, I was like, what's with you and the baby? And she was like, well, the negative's the baby, and you can't go to the grocery store without the baby. And so I sat there and was like, okay, fine. If you want to take the grocery store or take the baby to the grocery store, you need to make sure that the baby is in the van. And so if you want to apply the exponent to the negative, you need to make sure that the negative is inside parentheses. All right, so I don't know if that'll help you remember it or not. But just so you know, we have a couple things, okay? Our basic rules for this is number 1, any number raised to an even exponent is positive. So for instance, the A and C, when you raise a positive number to an even exponent, it stays positive. And when you raise a negative number to an even power, it is going to be positive. All right, our second rule that we have is any number raised to an odd exponent, and be very careful here. It is not necessarily going to be negative. It is going to keep its sign. So if you raise a positive number to an odd exponent, it stays positive. And if you take a negative number and raise it to an odd exponent, it stays negative. Okay, now the last rule that we have is if the negative is not in parentheses. The result will be negative. It does not matter whether your exponent is even or odd, because there's just one negative running around. And since there's just one negative running around, your answer will be negative. All right, so those are those examples. All right, so when will we see this again? We are going to be looking at exponents in the next two sections when we talk about order of operations. We are also going to see it at the beginning of Module B when we talk about evaluating expressions. And in that section, we are going to see examples where we have negatives inside and outside the parentheses, and you do want to be very careful about that when you are working on those problems. We will also see this and expand our rules of exponents when we talk about polynomials in Chapter 5. We will see exponents again when we talk about quadratic equations, including graphing polynomials and solving using the quadratic formula. So this is something that you will see repeatedly, and we've already seen it a little bit when we talked about prime factorization. And so this is one of those key things that does come up several times in math. Try the following problems on your own and bring your answers to class along with any questions that you may have. All right, now that you've gone ahead and watched the video, go ahead and take a few minutes and try the following problems on your own, and then check them with the answer key.